to Justice Quest.
Good morning, everybody. Well, I hope everybody had a fantastic weekend, just as I did. A lot of things happened this weekend. We got to spend time with family and friends, and we had a really good time. You know, today's scripture is going to be taken from Matthew 6:19. Do not lay up for, well, let me read it. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Yeah, that says a lot. Now, we've talked about over the last few weeks, the last couple of months, we've talked about the corruption going on in our government. Well, we're going to go ahead and kind of take a U-turn here and talk about corporate greed in America. And in some ways, it's worse than what's going on in Congress. You wonder why your prices are skyrocketing. A lot of the times it's fixed, you know. We'll cover the supposed meat shortage here during the COVID-19 scare, which was manufactured by Tyson and others, but it was done in cooperation with our government, you know. But anyway, I've got something to show you, and I break this out every once in a while and I read through it. A lot of you might remember this ad. It was ran in Popular Mechanics for quite a few years, and it was done by Premier Publishers out of Fort Worth, Texas. And it's Secrets of the 200 Mile Per Gallon Carburetor by Alan Wallace. Now, you know, when I bought my first pickup truck in 1981, whatever it was, you know, it got, probably about 13, 14 miles per gallon. And it hasn't got much better than that. Now, my present pickup truck has 16 miles per gallon, 1.6. And that's not a big improvement over 40 years, 45 years. And if cars had kept up with the computer industry, we'd have cars getting 1,000 miles per gallon. Have you ever thought about that? You know, we started back with the Commodore 64 chip, and then it went to the IBM 286, and now we've got, you know, we got more computing power in the computer running this show than were in a lot of supercomputers back in the 70s. You know, and it fits on. It's sitting here on a glass case in my studio, and probably about this long, this high, probably about that wide, you know, and not so much it's a gaming computer, and it does a lot of processing, you know, but you know, it's my watch has got more computing power than the IBM 286, you know, if you want to go ahead and think, or a Commodore 64, which were popular back in the day. You know, and it seemed like every 6 months you had to upgrade your computer to go ahead and keep up. And if our cars got as much, you know, kept up with computers, they would be getting 1,000 miles to the gallon. Okay. We'll get back to this here in a minute, but let me go ahead and, yeah, I'll leave it right here so I don't forget about it. The name of this person I was trying to think of in the last episode that predicted there was going to be a giant sucking sound going south, you know, as businesses would leave America to go to Mexico. That was Ross Perot. And he was right. And then when they come up with, we opened up China, he said it was going to be a second sound going east. Yeah, there was, And partially that's our own fault. But then again, where does your heart lay? Are you loyal to your workers, or are you loyal to the almighty dollar? And you're going to go ahead and grab as much as you can. We'll document that in this episode today. Let's go ahead and start off. I did a general search on 14 of the greediest companies in America. Interesting facts. Now, this is on Google. Standard Oil, founded by John D. Rockefeller in the late 19th century, is often considered to be the poster child of corporate greed. By the early 1900s, it controlled 91% of oil production and 85% of final sales in the U.S., creating one of the most infamous monopolies in history. Yeah, John D. Rockefeller also went ahead and labeled petroleum products as fossil fuels to go ahead and create the illusion that there was only a finite supply, therefore he could jack up the prices, all right? And I don't know how many times I've heard growing up that we were going to be running out of oil by 1980. We were going to be running out of oil by 1990, by 1995, 98, and then they finally just stopped it. There's more oil there's just as much oil on this planet as water. It's the second most common liquid. So there'd be no reason that every time somebody farts over in the Middle East that our price at the pump jacks up 40 cents. As what happened here in Grand Forks here just last week. It shot up from $3.49 up to $3.99 in one day. In one day, one station in Grand Forks kept it at $3.59, and that was it. The rest of them all went ahead and followed on the panic wagon. And why is that? I will go ahead and explain to you why that happened. And remember, you heard it here on Justice Quest. Oh, by the way, go ahead and go to our website and hit that donate now button, subscribe and follow. So go ahead and do that, and you'll be automatically signed up to receive these things. We are live on Facebook, and we are, not live on Facebook, but I go ahead and I put a copy of each broadcast on my timeline in Facebook, and it automatically goes to YouTube. All right. This is how they work. The company crushed competition by undercutting prices and buying out smaller players. In 1911, the U.S. Supreme Court broke up Standard Oil into smaller companies, but by then, Rockefeller was already the richest man in modern history. Yeah, that same goes on here in North Dakota. We have a contractor here or a house builder here in Grand Forks that goes ahead and buys up all the small contractors, hires them so that they'll work for them and they can charge whatever they want. Another one is the Enron scandal. The early 2000s is a textbook example of corporate greed. Enron used accounting loopholes and outright fraud to inflate its earnings and high debt, misleading investors and employees alike. When the scandal broke in 2001, it wiped out $74 billion in shareholder value and cost thousands of employees their retirement savings. Its collapse remains one of the largest corporate bankruptcies in U.S. history. Yeah. Who was held accountable for that? I don't know. I never heard of anybody going to jail. Now, I might be wrong. Wells Fargo. In 2016, Wells Fargo was caught opening millions of fake bank accounts without customer consent to meet aggressive sales targets. Employees were pressured to meet unrealistic quotas, leading to widespread fraud. The scandal resulted in billions of dollars in fines, a tarnished reputation, and a complete overhaul of the company's leadership. it remains a cautionary tale about prioritizing profits over ethics. Yeah, that's what happened. When I bought my house, Wells Fargo ended up holding my mortgage. Well, the prime rate was coming down, but yet I looked at my statement one month and I said the prime rate's going down below 6%, 5%. How come I'm still paying 14%? And I had an adjustable rate mortgage. So in theory, as it came down, my payments should be coming down. That's what adjustable rate mortgages were. I remember that. And Wells Fargo also held my credit card. And I never missed a payment, but yet my interest rate was going up and up and up. And I called them up and I said, you know what? This is wrong. I said, both accounts, you're the holder of these two, my mortgage and my credit card. I said, in both cases, they're going up and up and up. And, oh, well, you must have slipped through the cracks. So we're sorry about that. I said, well, you know what? You can kiss me goodbye. Come down to my local bank. And I said, I want to go ahead and change my mortgage over to you guys. All right. And we got it done. And I dropped my Wells Fargo credit card. Yeah. This is it. If you're not watching what's going on, these large companies will go ahead and take you for everything you've got. We had a natural gas, LP gas delivery company out here that would go ahead and be charging way and above what it was price per gallon as far as market. And my neighbor caught it. He went ahead and he called him up and he said, I won't say who the company was, but he called him up and says, propane is now sitting here at $1.25 a gallon, and I'm being charged $2.50 a gallon. He goes, oh, we're sorry about that. And he asked the question, he goes, how many of these people go ahead and they don't watch this stuff and they just pay it? You guys are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month off of fraud, out of cheating. God's word says, keep your business dealings honest. Oh, boy. Okay. The collapse of Lehman Brothers in 2008 was a defining moment in the global financial crisis. I don't know why they weren't bailed out. The firm's reckless investments in subprime mortgages and risky financial instruments created a ripple effect that nearly destroyed the global economy. Lehman's fall highlighted the dangers of unchecked greed in the financial sector, leading to widespread unemployment and financial ruin. Now, let me go ahead and explain the backdrop of this. Bill Clinton went ahead and repealed the Glass-Steagall Act at the behest of Congress. Now, Glass-Steagall was put in place so that we would not experience another crash of 29, all right? The banks were rolling up bad mortgages and selling them on Wall Street as investments. Does that sound familiar? That's exactly what happened in the early 2000s. The subprime mortgage, people were folding and they were rolling up these mortgages and selling them on Wall Street as an investment to go ahead and recoup their losses. All right. So, and that's what got us into this mess. I watched how the whole thing unfolded on a news corporation there. But anyway, this is back in 1857, 1874. We won't go, well, maybe we will. The British East India Company was as much a corporation as it was a colonial empire. In its pursuit of profit, it exploited India's resources, controlled trade routes, and even raised its own army to maintain dominance. Its policy led to famines, economic ruin, and cultural destruction in the territories it controlled. The company's greed eventually led to the Indian Rebellion of 1857 and its dissolution in 1874. Yeah, well, there you have it. But you know what? One thing that I read this, and it says this policy led to famines. Yeah. Mao's Great Experiment back in, I think it was like early 50s or something. He went ahead and was going to have the farmers double plant everything. And they were even planting crops and watering them with brackish water up in the northwest portion of China. I read this in a book called Mao's Great Famine. Well, that led to the desertification of that good chunk of China. And it led to the Great Famine that Mao caused. He was going to go ahead and say, well, they could take a year off and then devote themselves to academic study. Well, that all good in theory, but the government doesn't come in and tell the farmer how to raise crops, because that's not what they do. But anyway, Al Gore went ahead and capitalized this in his movie, An Inconvenient Truth, and he said that global warming has led to the desertification of Northwest China, and shows a picture of it. Well, no, that was Mao that did that. If you people believe everything that these idiots go ahead and spout off, yeah, you're being blown about by every to and fro by every wind of doctrine. I've been against this global warming thing from the beginning, and I read that book, Red Hot Lies, and that cinched it for me. I'm no longer believe in global warming. Now they go ahead and call it climate change. To go in, if we have a cold year, they attribute that to global or climate change. We have a warm year, as in here it's tickling 100 degrees here in North Dakota. But the same temperature increases that are happening here on Earth are also happening on the moon and in Mars. They got sensors to measure this stuff. And that makes it a solar event, not climate change. Oh, man, God did not give us a planet we could destroy. We can mess it up pretty bad in some areas. We could go ahead and get in a nuclear war. That'll cause nuclear winter, yeah, but, that's man-made climate change, but that's it. But let me go ahead and state this right now. I am pro-business. I am not socialist. We've seen what communism has done to businesses that are not regulated. They have to put out more and more and more for the state, and they have very few environmental regulations tied to them. We've seen that with in communist Russia. But I am pro-business, all right? I believe in free enterprise. I think that is the best system we have. But like any system, it's got its flaws. In 2015, Volkswagen admitted to cheating emissions tests for its diesel vehicles, falsely advertising them as environmentally friendly. This deception not only violated trust, but also caused significant environmental damage. That's up in the air. The company paid billions in fines. That's a charge where they don't provide any linking evidence. The company paid billions in fines and settlements, but the scandal remains a glaring example of corporate greed overriding ethics. Yeah, they lied, and I'll give them that. Monsanto. Now we've discussed Monsanto in an earlier episode here, where we talked about Food Inc. and how Monsanto is a major player in the agricultural and biotechnology industries. You're gonna have to look hard to go ahead and find a food that's not been tampered with in some way. How many real food products do we have out there anymore? Monsanto, a major player in agriculture and biotechnology, has been criticized for aggressive litigation against farmers, environmental damage, and the promotion of controversial products like Roundup. While the company's innovations have transformed farming, its methods have sparked widespread backlash, especially regarding genetically modified organisms, GMOs. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's corporate greed. Right now, our soil is so damaged. We got glyphosate traces in every square inch of soil here in the United States, just about. They're not using it back east yet, but yeah, it's going to make its way there. In fact, there's very few farms in back east that are still operating. Oh boy. Here's one I kind of hesitate to read because ExxonMobil has faced criticism for funding climate change denial campaigns, despite internal research confirming environmental impact of fossil fuels. You know, they say, how can I put this so that you people out there that only have 2 or 3 brain cells firing in sequence can understand it? They're saying that we're dumping CO2, carbon dioxide, into the air at an unprecedented rate. Well, the only ones doing that are China, and if they planted trees, that would take care of most of it. A study was done here that each tree goes and removes so many tons, 2 tons, 3 tons of carbon dioxide out of the air and releases oxygen back into the air. Your lawn does the same thing. Anything green that produces chlorophyll, yeah, it absorbs carbon dioxide and pushes out oxygen. That's how it works. So how can you go ahead and say that criticizing climate change denial is a crime? I say it's not. My hat's off to ExxonMobil. Good job there. That's not corporate greed. Climate change was a consensus, all right, that was signed by a bunch of scientists who were paid by certain actors in our political sphere to go ahead and say that climate change is happening or global warming is happening. While Apple is celebrated for its innovation, it has faced accusations of exploiting workers in its supply chain, avoiding taxes, and engaging in anti-competitive practice. The company's immense success often overshadows this controversy, but critics argue that its focus on profit sometimes comes at a significant human cost. Goldman Sachs was embroiled in the 1MDB scandal where billions of dollars were siphoned from Malaysia's development fund to fund personal luxurious lifestyles. The firm paid billions in fines for its role in facilitating the fraud. The scandal highlighted the risk of prioritizing lucrative deals over ethical considerations. For some reason, I think that government money was tied here. And I just saw an opportunity to go ahead and grab as much for themselves as they could. Here in Grand Forks, we had a school district that was begging for government help. We need $2 million for this. You know what? They didn't do anything to help the classrooms. They went ahead and put all that money into executive salaries. End of story. Like they're not getting paid enough. Yeah, that was kind of a mini scandal here in Grand Forks for a while. 18 shameless companies that continually rip their companies off. Let's see. Let's talk about corporations. We rely on them for everything from groceries to gasoline, often without examining their practices too closely. Yet some companies have track records so littered with controversies, it's shocking they haven't faced more consumer backlash. Wow, that's it. We're just getting started, people. We're almost halfway done with the show, and I still got all this to go through. We might have to do a second show on this on Wednesday. Standard Oil, we already covered that. Union Carbide, the Bhopal disaster. Anybody remember that? I do. In 1984, cost-cutting and negligence at a pesticide plant in India led to a gas leak that killed thousands and injured hundreds of thousands. The company prioritized profits over safety, making it one of the deadliest industrial disasters in history. Wow. Enron. Yeah, here's a good one. Enron executives used accounting fraud to hide debt and inflate earnings, misleading investors and employees. Its collapse in 2001 wiped out $74 billion in shareholder value. Yeah, we already did that. WorldCom, Lehman Brothers, both companies engaged in massive financial misreporting and risky practices. We have laws on the books. These CEOs should be going to prison. If not, hang them. Volkswagen, Roche. The pharmaceutical company set exorbitant prices for its HIV drug Fusion, refusing to sell it in South Korea at a lower price, prioritizing profit over access to life-saving medication. Wells Fargo, we already covered that. You know what? That Roche thing, yeah. You know my thoughts on that. Electronic Arts, EA Games, has been criticized for exploiting gamers through aggressive monetization, re-releasing incomplete games and shutting down smaller studios, prioritizing revenue over product quality and consumer experience. Wow. Yeah. We go ahead, people, when we go ahead and take a look at these things, and they're just blurbs on the 6 o'clock news to us, but we need to go ahead and research them and find out what's going on. There was this guy running around building sports stadiums for a while, and then after the city buys a sports stadium, he goes ahead and gets the team to move to another city where they have to build another sports stadium. It's like, you got to be kidding me. And he was never shut down, as far as I know. This one is DOD. Well, it's not hard to look to find fraud, waste, and abuse in the DOD. Reagan tried to get a handle on it, but it didn't work. My wife used to work in. This was a classic example. My wife used to work in the Air Force. She was a staff sergeant, and she worked in TMO, which is Transportation Management Office. She was responsible for scheduling pickup and packing of service members' goods to move to another PCS location. And she said that, the Paperwork Reduction Act, came down, and they got rid of their career field, got rid of one piece of paperwork, brought back two more to cover information that one got rid of when it was already documented on other pieces of paperwork. You gotta be kidding me. This is unbelievable. Well, that's just part of it. But here's a good one. The pitch. All right. This is DOD going ahead and paying for advertising at sports games. Sports stadiums are among the most patriotic places in America. Well, I'll go ahead and do that. I'll disagree with that. I'll say that the rifle range is the most patriotic place in America. But getting back to the sports stadiums, there you might witness a tear-jerking surprise reunion of a soldier just home from Afghanistan with his family on field reenlistment ceremonies, Air Force flyovers, and more. It's enough to put a lump in our throats and leave us thanking the individual teams for their commitment to our servicemen and women. The hitch. In 2015, it was revealed what sports fans had assumed were genuine shows of support for the armed forces by the teams in the NFL, the NBA, and the NHL. Major League Baseball and Major League Soccer had actually been business deals designed for profit. It wasn't that the sports teams had never staged sincere shows of patriotism. However, it's doubtful if fans would have responded so emotionally to all these spectacles had they understood that many of them were lucrative recruiting advertisements paid for by the Department of Defense. Arizona Senators, the fallout from that is Arizona's Senators Jeff Flake and John McCain launched an investigation and published a damning report on paid patriotism. They found the National Guard, the biggest advertiser, had dropped millions on sports teams while simultaneously appealing to Congress funding to meet $100 million budget shortfall. Really? You get paid a salary like the rest of us. We have to live on it. You live on it. Congress, you have to do the same. You take in so much in tax dollars, live on it. No more deficit spending. It goes on to say it's easier to be angry with the DOD. Yep. Okay. The pitch. As the U.S. population ages, Americans are becoming increasingly worried about dementia and Alzheimer's. That goes on to say most of us are concerned about our parents or grandparents. All right, the hitch, the science speak sounded good. Okay, advertisements for Luminosity's games, which cost $11.95 per month for a monthly plan, or $299.95 for a lifetime subscription, refer to them as improving your performance with the science of neuroplasticity. Well, that sounds pretty good, For those of you who are saying follow the science, I call it follow the brain did, which is the brain's ability to respond to new challenges by forging new pathways and connections. The hitch, the science speak sounded good. That's what I just said. But in 2014, 75 of the world top neurosciences researched a consensus statement accusing brain gain purveyors of hand-picked data that was only tangentially related to the game being sold and using it to make claims that were frequently exaggerated and often misleading. The fallout. This past January, Luminosity without admitting it or denying any wrongdoing, agreed to a $50 million judgment from the Federal Trade Commission for lacking data to support its scientific claims. Luminosity preyed on customers' fear of age-related cognitive decline. Yeah. $50 million judgment. But we didn't do anything wrong. Yeah. Well, you know what? If I get hauled into court, which I won't get hauled into court, I will not ever go ahead and agree to a payout if I didn't do something wrong. There is virtually no compelling evidence that fast food and sugary drinks cause obesity. Says Stephen Blair of Global Energy Balance Networks, or GEBN. In a video announcing the launch at scientific research organization Good Health, claimed GEBN is achieved when an individual balances calories consumed with calories burned. Yeah, that makes sense. We take in calories. We got to go ahead and get up, move around, walk, jog, and do whatever to go ahead and get rid of those calories. It makes us feel better, and our appetite. It seems to curb our appetite too. At least that's what I've noticed. The hitch, GEBN wasn't exactly a objective source. In 2014, James Hill, PhD at Colorado, had emailed Coca-Cola executives, "It's not fair that Coca-Cola is singled out as the number one villain in the obesity world." Hill wrote, "I want to help you combat and avoid the image of being a problem in people's lives." Yeah, Coca-Cola went ahead and funded the H2No campaign, which meant H2O is water. H2No was saying some restaurants were trained to correct diners' troublesome practices of ordering tap water instead of Coke. Yeah. That was one of their things in history that they kind of went ahead and stepped on themselves there. Theranos exaggerated the usage of its technology to pitch. And this is all on the internet, by the way. I just did a Google search for corruption in corporate America. Theranos was a hot new startup with breaking technology in 2003. So brilliant it threatened to disrupt the medical industry. The company said it was able to test for dozens of conditions, from HIV to high cholesterol, with just a few drops of blood from a person's pricked finger, as opposed to requiring vials of blood, thanks to Edison and his patented testing technology. Big names like Henry Kissinger joined the board, and investors showered the private company with hundreds of millions of dollars. Last year, Forbes gave Theranos $9 billion of valuation, estimated the personal net worth of then 31-year-old founder and CEO Elizabeth Holmes, who owned 50% stake in the firm, a cool $4.5 billion. You know, that sounds all well and good, but that's like Barack Obama receiving a Nobel Peace Prize for doing nothing, you know. In 2015, the hitch, okay. The 2015 anonymous former employees spoke to the Wall Street Journal, voiced concern about Edison's accuracy. They also claimed the company had stopped using it and instead resorted to industry standard testing methods, the very methods the company had intended to replace. A Theranos spokesperson called the article factually and scientifically erroneous. It goes on and on. The fallout. They went broke. As for Holmes, her net worth was also downwardly revised to zero. Yeah. Despite the reassuring public that the tests were reliable, Theranos notified or revised 2 years' worth of Edison-generated results in May. Yeah. Okay. ExxonMobil obstructed action on climate change. Good for you. I'll say you were right in that area. Okay. And there we have it. You know, and it goes on and on and on. It's not your imagination. This is corporate greed. Two industries that use global crises to rob us. It's not your imagination if everything seems to cost more lately. It's because, and this is all a simple search in the internet. I didn't do any digging. I just started, print, print, and then we go ahead and start underlining the highlights. You know, wow. This is amazing, and I didn't even go off the first page of corporate corruption. It's not your imagination. If everything seems to cost more lately, it's because it does. Think about the things you usually buy at the grocery store or retail shop. Add up your groceries and gasoline. Since the pandemic started, prices have gotten higher and higher for nearly everything we need to live. Some industries, oil and gas, even use the war in Ukraine as a pretense for scarcity price gouging. Yeah, no kidding. It's why, like I said, somebody farts somewhere and the price shoots up 50 cents a gallon or more. Unchecked corporate greed affects every person and every family in the county, and voters are sick of it. Yeah, they're using the American taxpayers as ATM machine. Oh, I need to buy a new corporate jet this month. All right, jack the price of gasoline up 10 cents. We'll go ahead and create a problem here. All right. Oh, yep. Iran just blocked the Strait of Hormuz. That we get 20% of our oil from there. The world does. 20% of the world's oil flows through the Hormuz. So let's jack up our prices 40%. Yeah. And we are exporting oil now. And I have got a thing here somewhere, and we'll get to it here in a little bit. Unchecked corporate, yeah, I just did that. In 2020, as coronavirus killed millions and crumpled small businesses across the country, corporate titans saw a chance to profit. Guess what? Smithfield and Tyson are prime examples. Then President Trump hyped their PR about a meat shortage. Meat packing plants pressured staff to work regardless of illness in conditions that were more unsafe than usual. Vice President Pence appealed to meatpacking workers, telling them how vital they are because lobbyists told them to. Even with that stunning unethical pressure, production fell, but from an already unsustainably high levels. There's no production. There's an overproduction because overproduction was the status quo and demand fell when consumers curtailed dining out. There was plenty of meat in cold storage. In fact, the U.S. was so flush with meat supply that exports carried on as usual. And yet we were stuck paying higher prices. 4 years ago, I was at an auction house and I watched the price of beef go ahead and go up from $2 a pound and was tickling $3 a pound in just one day. And since has gone up. All the while, food corporations issued fake warnings about food shortages so they could jack up prices. We actually filed suit against Smithfield for lying about the situation. The corporate motto: never let the truth get in the way of a good story, especially if that story multiplies your profits. That mindset has spread from the food sector to touch every consumer. Yeah, here. Right here. Where your heart is, there is also your treasure. And again, I don't go ahead and hold I'm in favor of business. I'm in favor of big business. However, when the big business starts doing their corporate games, all right, there used to be over 10,000 slaughterhouses here in the United States, but now there's less than 50. Yeah. I started this year. I started buying my meat from a local farmer. He goes ahead and he lets me pick out the cow, take it to the butcher, and we buy a quarter beef from him every year. And that's enough to go ahead and take care of my wife and me. Let's see. The corporate model. Oil and gas used an old tactic to gouge consumers during the Ukraine war. Russia's invasion of Ukraine became another convenient pretense for profit, this time for prolonged spike in gasoline prices. Yeah, we were at $2.19 a gallon. Back when my son 4 years ago graduated basic training, and I stayed there about a year, and then the Russia invaded Ukraine, and then prices shot up again. Billions of dollars in profits are being reported every quarter. Yep, cha-ching. Let's use the consumer. Cha-ching is an ATM machine. Cha-ching, 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 cha-ching. How about if the farmer did that to American consumer? They get all the farmers in here and say, okay, the price of milk is now $6 a gallon, and that's straight from the cow, or $12 a gallon. That's what they need to do. But the soft drink companies have gone ahead and pushed milk back into the thing, So no wonder we have obese children who just sit on their well-fed behinds and play games all day. Russia's invasion of Ukraine become another community. Yeah, okay. But shareholders were making billions in profit. CEOs who personally profited were in no hurry to do anything that even looked helpful, since their Wall Street investors were benefiting from a fake shortage. Yeah. You remember back in the oil embargoes of the 70s, several people caught companies taking gasoline out into the desert and just torching it. Yeah. The evidence could not be any clearer. The fossil fuel giants are cashing in on the global energy crunch, pinching American families and sending excess profits back to shareholders. And yeah, we already covered that. Yeah. Yeah, they want to go ahead and windfall profit tax. Yeah, that's another tax. Forget it. How about taking oil off the commodity markets? Yeah, let's go ahead and end the speculation. You know, you're in business to make a profit. Yeah, you make a profit. You take your million or 2 million a month and you live on that. And when did we start seeing this thing? When did I Google this? When did oil become part of the commodities market? Let's see. The creation of New York Mercantile Exchange in 1978, which facilitated trading of crude oil futures. Prior to that, we had oil embargoes that kind of raised the price up 10, 20, 10, 15 cents at a time, and that's kind of how it went. We were on a binge of let's use the Middle East oil before we start drilling for our own. And here's the thing that, and this came out of Russia, that old oil wells, when they left alone for a period of years, they go ahead and they refill up again. The Earth continually is making oil. But that report was classified. So now that oil is now on a commodities exchange. Oh yeah, we've got investors. And I know I've played the commodities markets. I know how they work. When people see a crisis in Middle East oil, everybody goes long on oil prices. Okay, fine. If price goes up, they make their money. Boom, end of story. Yeah, but that goes in and catches the little guy that's sitting there with 4, 5, 6 kids. Trying to fill a pickup truck to go ahead and make it work, to go ahead and make it to work, where he earns $20 an hour. Yeah. That is not right, I've seen this again and again and again. These business owners, they own companies and they buy all these toys, but they pay their workers just enough to go ahead and starvation wages is what I call it. You have enough to live on. End of story. Take a second job. We go ahead and I came home from work one day. I was working as a carpenter, and my wife hit me up at the door, and she was listening to these economic things on the History Channel or something. And she come home and met me at the door and said, you know what, a carpenter made enough in 1950 to go ahead and survive, could afford a house, a car, 8 kids, and send all those kids to college. That's what it was back in there. Now, anybody calling themselves, I went to school. I'm working for this guy, and he hired a guy and I had a certificate, all right, that I went to carpentry school, and this kid come in there, and he was getting paid just as much as me. And he was the poorest carpenter I'd ever seen, ever. God, man. It seems like everybody that swings a hammer is being calls themselves a carpenter nowadays, and that's just not right. I've seen carpenters being hired out of the jail that can't even make a proper size rough opening for a door. It's unbelievable. Yeah. Oh boy. The International Energy Agency, yeah, here we go again, warned in 2021 that fossil fuel production must stop growing immediately to avoid the worst effects of climate chaos. Yeah, well, that's false. We know that, or I know that. I hope all you do too. Oh, looks like I got some comments here. Let's see. All from VMAX 40. The past, we can't fix what idiots did. All right, let's try this. Let's show this. The past is the past. We can't fix what the idiots did. We need to move forward and then focus on what the idiots are doing to ruin this country now. Yeah, no kidding. This show needs a major revamping. Focus on getting justice done now, not in the past. All right. Yeah. We've got to go ahead and I'll answer that one. I'm going to go ahead and put that up there. This show needs a major revamping. Focus on getting justice done now, not the past. There's always going to be crooked. We just have to stop it. Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. We are detailing the past so that we know what to look for in the future. All right. I have gone ahead on this show and said that many times that, major banks are getting caught laundering money for the drug cartels, and yet nobody ever goes to jail for it. They only get fined, usually at a ridiculously low price, so they make billions of dollars on top of that. All right. Yeah. We are going to be going ahead. And, to VMAX 40, I'll say, wait till the end of the show. I'll be getting into it. We go ahead and all these major bills are passed. I'm going to be doing a research on the Save America Act, which is supposedly, I'm going to go ahead and find out the fine print details for you, so we can go ahead and find out what's actually going on behind the scenes. And this brochure here goes ahead and explains it all. And this is how it got onto me. So we can go ahead and say that, we're going to have to go ahead and cut it short. We're coming up on an hour here. But I'll go ahead and I'll save this for another time, probably on Wednesday. But let me get into this 200 mile per gallon carburetor. And at the beginning of the show, I pointed out that if automotive technology has kept up with computers, we should be getting 1,000 miles per gallon by now. We're not. But I went ahead and this appeared in Popular Mechanics, and I sent my $4.95 in to go ahead and get it with. And I read it continuously for, probably a month or two. But this is one of the Albert Pogue carburetors right there. And it's a heat exchanger. What it does is it shoots gasoline in there and turns it into a pure vapor. All right. And his patents claim to have gotten 200 miles per gallon, or just under 200 miles per gallon. So this is from Breen Motor Company Limited. I made a test of the Pogue carburetor installed on a Ford 8-cylinder coupe. Okay, this doesn't give the year. Okay, I drove the car 26.2 miles on 1 pint of gasoline. And today I'll get you down to the corner. The temperature was averaging around 0 with a strong north wind blowing. I drove for 15 miles and back on the same road, and the distance as shown by the speedometer reading was 26.2 miles when the gasoline was exhausted and the car stopped. The performance of the car was 100% in every way. And you've got example after example after example. And then further on, you've got examples of people that design their own carburetors and with testimonials on it. Let's see if I can find one here. Let's see. So, yep. Let's see. Cars that get 100 miles per gallon. Yep. Let's see. All right. Richard Goran Flo, mileage unlimited, 109. Has been giving seminars and claims to get 45 to 65 miles per gallon on a 1976 Cadillac with a 425 CID engine. Okay. Bernard Wary, he now has 3 different carburetors, and one of them gets him 60 miles per gallon on his Chrysler Cordoba. Okay. Ray Covey of El Paso, Texas, has worked on the device for more than a year now and has applied for patent. He has not been able to get as high as 110 miles per gallon He has been able to get as high as 110 mile per gallon under some testing, but normally the average is not quite that good. He's got a couple of mechanics working with him, helping him, and worked out just about every problem. Okay. Yeah, we're talking about corporate greed here. You know what happened? You know why carburetors like this didn't make it? It was called a little thing called the Clean Air Act, passed back in the early 80s or late 70s. All right. That said, mandated that any device that we put back into cars has to be OEM, or original equipment manufactured. No matter how clean it burns, okay, if it's not OEM equipment, they can't pass it. All right, that's in states where exhaust tests are taken. So what we have is the corporations. They were getting tired of paying out multi-million dollars for carburetors that got high mileage. Because, of course, where's their money at is in oil, gasoline. That's what they want. When we go ahead and talk about justice, we're talking about equality for the American people. This has got to stop. They can't keep using Americans as a ATM machine. Oh, we need another $1 million this month. Cha-ching, you know. And the Clean Air Act was passed with Congress's okay, and the president signed it into law. This has got to stop. This is corruption. It's about time the hardworking American taxpayer go ahead and get a fair shake on some of these deals. We've got to go ahead and take back our country in all aspects, politically and business-wise. We can pass all the laws we want. Let's go ahead and talk about, for instance, all these people that come up, tax the rich. Yeah, they get in the office, they pass a rich tax, but the rich don't pay any more in taxes because they design loopholes into the law. So they get to use it to talk about, yeah, I went ahead and I passed a tax on the rich, but the unspoken part was, yeah, they also provided the loopholes for it. Oh. You know, and we didn't even scratch the surface. You know, we got about half of it done. We still got the other half to go. I'm kind of toying with the idea of going overtime today, but I'm kind of thinking maybe I won't. Maybe I'll go ahead and continue this on Wednesday. And we'll go there. But anyway, go ahead and go to the website, justicequestlive.com. Go ahead and hit that donate button and subscribe and follow. So with that, go ahead and catch us on YouTube. Catch me on Facebook. It's on my webpage or my Facebook page, Thomas O'Neill. And you all have a good day. So with that, we'll say bye-bye, everybody.